Mr. G. It is Tuesday, 27th August 2024, and it is the 33rd Tuesday of 2024. It's just about 8:05 p.m. in our studios at Q95, and we're live on our radio frequencies on QTV, on Facebook, on YouTube. Please follow us at the Q95 FM radio, share the live, like our pages. The on your phone numbers are on the homepage of our website at www.q95da.com. Get the latest breaking news and reviews on Q95 because, as you know, it is true if you hear it on Q. So we continue to revive the spirit of graciousness, of love and peace and prosperity and unity among our Kalinago and Afro-Caribbean brothers and sisters. It is also our 33rd Global View on Q for the 2024, and we continue to engage with our cherished local, regional, global Q family listeners and friends of Dominica. Our distinguished guests are Justice Dr. Irving Andre. Tonight we'll be joined in a while by social scientist Simeon Joseph. I'm sure we'll admit him as soon as he logs in with us tonight. We may be joined later by distinguished pharmacist Carlton Langdo, who I know is in another engagement, but he did indicate that he would try to make it. So if he doesn't make it, we will not be too disappointed, but so we will understand. And I also want to say tonight, I want to give a special shout out to our most distinguished guest, Pastor Dr. Randy Rodney. Tonight, it's all about drugs, it's about guns, it's about crime and the law, national security and safety in Dominica. But before we go any further, I really wanted to, just give a little shout out to our dear pastor, Dr. Randy Rodney. I mean, he has accomplished, the thing about it is he had so much secret, they call that segue. He doesn't tell people his business. So we're going to try to get into his business a little bit. And we hope to hear him give us some of they have a name calling that in Kolibi Street. Somebody Segue. He'll tell us some of that, how he got to be where he is today, because the thing is that nobody knew this man doing all the things he's been doing. Nobody knew he has accomplished as much as he has. Pastor Rodney, I want to take the liberty of asking you to tell us a little bit about all of what is going on. And I'm sure Dr. Andre, a country bookie like me, he wants to know what's going on with you, Rosa fellas. Tell us what is happening, how you come to reach where you are there today.
Well, that's interesting. I mean, in that case, I don't know who's contributing.
Hold on. I'm hearing some people talking in the back. I don't know whether it's in your area, but I heard some people talking there in the background. So you might want to ask them if
you still do.
No, I'm not hearing that anymore now. Maybe it was a radio you had on, so I'm not hearing it. So
Okay.
Go right ahead.
Yeah, I was about saying that I'm not sure who you call country bookie, and if you're trying to insinuate something about me,
No.
I was born in.
Irvin, I was talking about you.
Oh, Irvin, you're talking about?
Yes.
Irvin was born in Portsmouth, and Portsmouth is the second town.
Please, Malpish, but so go ahead, no problem. It's okay, no problem, it's fine. That's okay, no problem. The power will be with us always.
I was born in Kolibi Street, Mr. G.
Yes.
Between the mountains. I was raised there for some time, and sometime in my life, I was in Mahu, where my father is from. Both of those villages, if my information is correct, are country. So that's where I come from. I happen to live in Mzol now, and I love living there because it's like country.
Right.
It's like country. But you asked me a question that I will proceed to give some information on. Education is for me something that I've sought after, been after. I tell people I learn every day. I do my very best to learn something new every day. Consequently, I read at least 3 or 4 books a year. I try to make that at least my average annually, and I read all kinds of books. I've always been doing that from a young boy. I remember when my uncle came from England one time. In fact, when he was coming down, I asked him to bring for me the most controversial book at the time, Satanic Verses, written by Salman Rushdie, because I was intrigued and I wanted to know, what is happening there. Well, fast forward, I've done something with the University of the West Indies. I've done a few things, in fact, with the University of the West Indies. I did some studies in Jamaica, Jamaica Graduate School of Theology. I did an online course with Fifth Christian College in Florida very many years ago. And I can go on and list them. Before the program, I was saying to you that I have a certificate from Harvard Business School in business administration that I did somewhere in 2010 or thereabout. Yeah.
Well, you're not as young as I thought then.
Well, I'm still very young, you know, comparatively. And so in 2017, in fact, I should back up and tell you that in 2008, I did 1 year with the University of London in law, about a year and a half. And then my wife got sick and I had to drop out after I had paid quite some money. So I dropped out to make sure I took care of my wife instead. But in 2017, into 2018, I started to do a PhD with Build International, and that was in theology. That was an online course, but we had face-to-face classes, if you like, online, twice a week.
So Pastor Rodney, just give me 1 second, because I'm still hearing some.
Hold on just a moment. Hold on just a moment. Let me see if I can do that here.
Yeah, so Dr. Andre, while Pastor Rodney is taking care of that little matter there, I have to tell you that I was a little surprised when I found out all what he has been doing. Yes, so that's taken care of?
Yeah, I'm back with you now.
Okay.
Yeah, so I began to do that then. There were students from practically all over the world. There were about 6 students from the US, a couple from Canada, from the 3 of us from the Caribbean, Jamaica, Dominica, 1 guy from Guyana, and quite a number of them. And I love this style of study. I was appreciating what I was doing. And but then when I began to look at it, it was going to probably take me 8 years before I finish. And I figured, wow, I am doing some work that I already know, quite some work that I already know. I looked at the curriculum, and 4 years of that would actually be 4 years of repeating work. And so I decided to drop out. I dropped out. I registered it. I didn't register with them. I had conversations with Logos University out of Florida. We were talking quite some. And in fact, they still send me the correspondences and invite me to the graduations. And I decided to choose another university, which I pursued a year and a half now, from the UK, United Christian Bible University. And they took into consideration the level of work that I had done, the academic work that I had done as well, and offered me some credits. But even before they offered me the credits for that, they were prepared to present me with a doctorate, a Doctor of Divinity. But I not that I am fresh or anything like this, but I figured I wanted more than that. So I said to the dean, thanks, but is there anything else? Can you assess what I've done and have me do something that will, matriculate me? And I received information from them that I was to write a paper, and I did that. I wrote a paper on salvation. A few subjects that I did an excess around: salvation, the Trinity, the Holy Trinity, the fivefold ministry, and baptism. And I tied it in with leadership from the biblical perspective when I came to the fivefold ministry, and submitted that. And once I submitted that in April, the end of April of this year, by May, I got news that, in fact, that which I was requiring, I, in fact, met their requirements for a doctorate in education and Christian leadership. I also wrote a paper, in fact, a historical perspective of the Bible school that I'm president of in Dominic Adult Church, something that I established in 2015 in collaboration with organization in the US out of New Jersey. So yeah, that's what that is. So I knew of that. I got it in May, and I was, I just held it close to my chest, waiting for the actual graduation, which was supposed to have been held in London. But because, again, there were quite a number of students from the US, a couple of people from Jamaica, one person from Guyana, I believe. So because of that, they decided that they would move the location of the graduation to New York, to Manhattan. And so I was happy for that because I didn't have to pay for a new visa to go to England. I'm not sure that George and Andre and them would give that to me either. I had my US visa, so I decided to go to the US instead. And that happened last week. And I was happy to have had my entire family with me at that occasion. In fact, they were excited to come along. My children paid their own way to ensure that they came to clap for me at the graduation. And so here we are. So it was a secret, not secret for some time. But here we are. That's what it is.
Yes, Dr. Andre, I'm sure that you might want to have a few words on this. You're muted.
Yes. Let me say good evening to.
Before you go on, I just want you to let Pastor Rodney know. I'm still hearing the voice is low, but in the background. So if they don't want the world to hear them, which is what is happening now, I want to turn it down a little bit. Okay, Dr. Andre.
Yes, good evening to your listeners. Good evening to the panelists. Good evening to Brother Lambie. Good evening to Sherwin. Good evening to Mr. G. And good evening to the Q95 family. Let me commend Dr. Rodney for his wonderful work, not just in attaining the distinction of gaining a doctorate in education and Christian teaching, but also for the prodigious work he's done over the years. In fact, he's obviously one of the guiding lights in terms of Dominica and where it's at right now. And the fact of the matter is that we need as many guiding lights as possible. Obviously, education is something which is worthy to be pursued vigorously with no apologies. And in my view, we've been blessed with a certain degree of intelligence, hopefully motivation, dedication, stamina. And this news coming right on the heels of our celebration of Thea Lafont, it speaks to the fact that there are still Dominicans who rely on sheer grit, energy, determination, effort, dedication to succeed. They don't go to some country and acquire any type of distinction. They work for it. And isn't that the message that we want to teach the young people coming up who are seeking guidance? Isn't that the type of direction that they need? That there is nothing which is more precious than that which you have struggled for, that which you have sacrificed for. It is a message which has great resonance today as we speak, at a time when wealth is displaying its lavish clothing in great abandon, without any care and concern for those who are suffering, for those who are struggling, for those who are making a valiant effort to buy food, to provide for their children, to send them to school, to put a roof over their heads. What better example can we set than to show that after a period of great toil, we have succeeded? And that is more relevant today than perhaps at any other time in our history. At a time when, as we speak, we are being beset by increasing crime, we are being forced to ask the question, what exactly is the justice system? Whose interest does it serve? To what extent is it performing its function? Do we have a system of crime protection as opposed to crime prevention? Can we talk about toughening the laws without enforcing the laws? So the Pastor Rodneys of this world, they've been blessed. They have been given some special talents, and they've sowed those talents in fertile soil. And it's good to see that they can reap the rewards. Unfazed by the thought and by the realization that, what is the saying? The prodigal or those who have achieved are oftentimes not welcome in their own country or community. But it is fortunate that we as a society, we have some persons who are undeterred because they do it for the salvation of the country, as opposed to they doing it for personal accolades. And so I commend Pastor Rodney for his fine example. And I hope there are other young persons who are certainly looking at him and saying, I too can achieve what this man of God has achieved. In Jesus' name, we pray.
Well, amen. And well, really and truly, I am pretty sure that there are many, many young people who are listening to us here tonight who are saying exactly what you just said. I mean, Pastor Rodney is a living example. He has shared so much with so many young people in Dominican, with so many people, Dominicans in general. I mean, in terms of all of the work that he's been doing, you know, pastoring and caregiving and helping people get out of difficulties. And so many people have so many difficulties today. It's not easy. And some of the things we're going to talk about will reflect that. Some of what we're going to talk about tonight. And there are people, all kinds of crimes taking place, all kinds of abuses taking place. A minute ago, I was just taking a little minute there to try to help Simeon to log in. He's been trying to log in. He's having a little technical difficulty, but Sherwin is helping him to log in. So Simeon will join us very, very shortly. But Pastor Rodney, I wanted to say that really and truly, some of the work that you've been doing in this regard, we're going to talk about it in a while, but let me just sort of get going so that we can introduce properly and embrace our guests who are listening to us. So here are some of the talking points that we will be talking about tonight. I will, in fact, also talk about what Dr. Andre just mentioned. There's some of the things he mentioned. We'll talk about these crimes at all levels in the society. We talk about crimes against humanity, street crimes, drug-related crimes, arson, and we can relate all those things to some of the things that have been happening in Dominica. We have concrete examples of them: battery, organized crimes, gun crimes, domestic crimes, property crimes. You know, we'll talk about that too, and the failure to apply the law and preserve our national security, which includes, and many people don't understand that national security includes non-military dimension, non-policing, such as mining or minimizing crime, economic security, energy security, environmental security, food security, cyber security. There's so much more of all of that that we can talk about under the name of national security. And that is why, for example, Matt did extend an invitation to, I think, our Minister for National Security, Mr. Raymond Blackmore. He did indicate to Matt that if he got an invitation, he would come on the Global View on Q and have a dialogue, and he was willing to do that. So I took a little time and I did a little voice note, and I sent it to Minister Blackmore. That was sometime around about a week or more ago. I have not heard from him at all, so I'm assuming that he did not receive it. So, but Mr. Blackmore, if you're listening and if you did receive it, please be advised that we're very happy to have you on our program. You may call tonight or you may come on some other time on the Global View. We're happy to discuss some of those things that we're talking about tonight because we know you have a keen interest in some of those. As a matter of fact, this is your portfolio. We would love to engage you in some of those discussions there. But as Dr. Andre was saying, and Pastor Rodney and our listeners, are the authorities more interested in crime protection and in crime prevention? And if not, why protect certain criminals? Those are the questions Dr. Andre is asking. Why engage in nollie-pros in cases of drug dealers? Why are they doing nothing when those involved in dangerous driving causing death are allowed to just leave the country and flee? Why are they refusing to lay charges even when they have a signed confession? And why return unlicensed guns to political operatives? And why are they simply, the authorities I'm referring to, persecuting their political opponents? We'll talk about all of that. And we'll talk about the urgency for people's power now to fuel the campaign for the way forward for appropriate electoral and campaign finance laws and regulations to see Dominica through its ongoing, what we might refer to as a perfect storm of all its crime and drugs and guns and so on. And of course, law enforcement. I mean, there's so many laws in the books and statutes, but they're not being enforced. You have seatbelt laws. I don't see any policemen driving a seatbelt. We have noise abatement laws. I don't see any, but we have so many laws. And so tonight we will show how the crisis of electoral reform machinations has implications for reducing the negative influence and the impacts of drugs and guns and crime on unproductive national budgets. This is national budgets. We have to make the connection to those things because we see all these projects listed in budgets. Nothing is coming in and endless money going all over the place. We have to look at all of that when you talk about those issues. You know, and the unproductive national budgets, yes, but like those that have been presented from year to year for over 20 years on lower productivity, we have to look at the question of lower productivity. Although we have these magnificent budgets, unfulfilled goals and objectives, unfulfilled deliverables showcased in these budgets, which has resulted in failed social structures and services and social decadence. It is there, it is evidence in our face. There was a young man talking to Matt the other day, talking about what's happening in drugs being, peddled on the street openly. Nobody's saying anything. A small society like that, don't tell me we don't know who those people are. So we'll keep asking the questions, who is looking after the poor people's interests? Who is speaking for them? What has been accomplished for the ordinary Dominicans over the past 24 years? We know that the CBI program has become more and more plagued with bad operators because of failed due diligence, which has resulted in cancellations of citizenships of so many of these alleged crooks, criminals, and bad actors. All of that comes under the topic that we're talking about tonight. But absolutely nothing is being done about these agents that are selling underpriced passports to those crooks and criminals. Meantime, CBI funds are allegedly facing difficulties getting into the treasury due to the suspicious financial crimes and works on proposed international airport and works projects like the Dominica Grammar School. Why these projects have gone the way they've gone? They've slowed considerably. We don't know what's happening. And so the people must secure their electoral and campaign finance reforms and level the playing field to ensure free and fair elections in order to secure their democracy and restore Dominica's reputation and credibility in the regional and global community. So, our national security minister, he claims that guns will not be allowed to enter the country through the back door. But what about the illegal Pui voters who have been coming in and just voting willy-nilly? They were invited to come on Pui and come in back door, come in front, or come in anyway because they said that's how we traditionally have traveled. And what is really being done about the drugs and guns that are already in circulation and that are now being sold in the country openly? So we will continue to allow, will we continue to allow our passport sellers to betray the trust of our people, betray the trust even further and continue to sell out the future of our children, to sideline local contractors and all local service providers through these questionable no-bid contracts to foreign companies, to continue the ongoing persecution of the opposition leaders and independent thinkers, to continue the victimization and discrimination and oppression of people who dare to have a different opinion. So the only answer, I believe now, is people's power. As Dr. Andre always tells us, He always tells us sitting on the fence or hiding in the shadows is really not working. All right. So let's get down to business, right? I want to just reach out to the people who are with us on Facebook, or cherished friends and listeners, viewers and callers at home in Dominica, in the region, and globally. I can see our Facebook friends are really started logging into us, and our YouTube friends are logging in. Reach out to you, shout out to you, and I hope you will opine on the merits and demerits of whatever we are continuing to witness in Dominica in terms of these drugs and crime and guns and law enforcement and so on. So we'll invite you or Q family friends to stay with us and have your say as you do every Tuesday with me. And I want to also send out our usual hugs and love and appreciation, the big thank yous to our healthcare providers, our frontline workers, police, fire officers, teachers, our pastors, our doctors, nurses, public and private sector patrons at home and abroad. We embrace all of you. We also shout out to Sherwin and Lambi. We embrace you as well for keeping us on the air. Doing a great job at that. So now I just want to go now straight over to Justice Dr. Andre for his opening remarks to get the ball rolling on our engagement tonight. There's so much to talk about. And as I go to Dr. Andre, I just want to welcome Simeon, our distinguished social scientist, who really needs no introduction at all in Dominica, in the region for that matter. He's joined us now, and we're very, very happy to have you, Simeon. You were not here a little earlier when we would point some accolades on Pastor Rodney for having achieved his doctorate. But I guess when you come to make your remarks, you will probably want to take a moment to do that. Dr. Andrew, let me go over to you now to get the ball rolling.
Yeah, once again, good evening. Good evening to Mr. Simeon Joseph. It's good to see him, and good evening to the listeners. Sometime last week, I think Matt Peltier played a couple of clips from the Prime Minister opining about electoral reform, opining about campaign finance reform. And he was making the point that this is so difficult that we cannot deal with it on our own. And he was saying the Dominicans should remember their history. And it seems to me that he did not appreciate the irony of his comments, because the man who received $650,000 had no difficulty coming up with proposals for campaign finance reform. By the click of a mouse or a finger, one can search the internet and find that a number of Caribbean countries have had no difficulty addressing this important aspect of free and fair elections. So when the Prime Minister says that this is a difficult subject, again, quite frankly, with the greatest of respect, I think the whole thing is a joke. There's nothing difficult about this. And when the Prime Minister tried to invoke history, one thing which came to my mind is, does he remember the history of resistance of our forefathers? Does he remember what happened even after slavery was abolished in on about 1834? Does he remember that the colonial authorities, to force the ex-slaves to sell their labor to their former slave masters, passed and enacted laws, Habitual Idlers Act, Vagrancy Act, which imposed stiff sentences of imprisonment if an ex-slave failed to provide his labor to his former master or to any estate owner? And does he forget the history of ex-slaves toiling, trying to secure lands to grow their crops and to provide for their children? And is this the same man who has overseered a regime in Wesley where the ancestral lands of these descendants of slaves are taken without any compensation? Does he hear the cry of people like Nurse Dalrymple and Basil and others asking for a reasonable compensation for the lands that they have farmed and their family and their father and their grandfather? And is this the person or individual who is talking about we should remember our history. You serious, Nagaso? So we live unfortunately at a time when morality has been swept or placed in a brown paper bag and dumped in the garbage. And we have to try to take back decency in our community. And the whole question of electoral reform is integrally related to the question of criminality and how we deal with it. Go ask the people in, is it Soufriere? Ask them for how many years they have filed reports with the local constabulary about being denied access to a historic road in the heights of Soufriere. Ask them what was the response. Ask them to what extent were they divorced from their own ancestral lands in terms of being denied free access to that land by persons who've been given concessions to sell passports. Ask them what was the tragic consequence of that failure to uphold the law or to apply the law in a very selective fashion. So that all this hue and cry about death penalty, that appeals to some people, but it does not, and it will not, and has never solved any criminality in any country, let alone Dominica. Dominica has the unusual phenomenon of having unsolved crimes. I mean, every Dominican will tell you that every Dominican knows the business of everybody. The only person who was able to hide his business was Pastor Rodney for a few months, but he had divine assistance. And in Dominica, you have unsolved murders, Gaston. The folk don't know, or they're looking a different way. You have fellas discharging firearms caught on social media. Nothing happens. Guns coming into through the customs. Very few charges being laid. You have fraud committed on a widespread scale. Nothing comes out of it based on who is accused or who is involved. The elections, that's another travesty. Persons being facilitated to come into the country, to subvert the rule of law, to subvert our electoral rules, to vote. Nothing comes out of it. And then we are pontificating and we are beating our chest like Tarzan, indicating that we are going to introduce the death penalty and people should feel safe once you have this type of pronouncement. The whole thing is a joke. Nothing but a joke. Enforce those laws on the books, and then you can start talking about the rule of law. Then you can start talking about deterrence. Do not use the police in a very cynical fashion. And you remember the words of what's his name, Inspector Weeks. It is those who have abandoned the ethos of their position who are being credited. It is those who subvert the rule of law who receives the promotion. This is coming from persons from inside law enforcement. They know better than I. And what about our prosecutorial services? What about our judicial officers? Are they operating at arm's length? Are decisions being made to proceed or not to proceed? Are these being done on strictly legal terms as opposed to political partisanship terms? What about the CCJ? Is its rulings respected, adhered to, or just be dismissed based on who it affects? We're in a state of crisis, and it's unfortunate because everyone is equal under the law. Everyone should have the equal protection of the law. What about that infamous case years ago where someone gives you a confession? In every country, democratic, I should say, police officers, they wait with bated breath to get a confession from an accused, because invariably That is the strongest piece of evidence from a law enforcement perspective. And yet, in that infamous case, the police basically said, Garçon, we don't want that confession. No. Take your confession and go. Huh? It is an indictment of the system and how it should be operating. It is a clear indication that, quite frankly, justice is an alien being when it comes to certain persons who've been aggrieved. And that is the state of affairs that we have today. And that is the direct repercussion of our failure to have honest, fair elections. Let me ask you this as my last parting shot before I take my leave. Let me ask you this. Who in their right mind, who is interested in free and fair elections, would be opposed to biometric data on a voter identification card? Who would be appalled and afraid and opposed to fingerprints on these cards? I've heard I've heard comments talking about the criminalization of persons to vote. Utter nonsense. Mr. G, I know you have a visa for every country in this godness earth, but for those of us who need a visa to go to the States, what is the first thing they do when you arrive at the US border, Garçon? They take a picture of you and they fingerprint you. Huh? And those Dominicans who are in the United States, what do they tell what do they tell the customs officials in the United States? What you doing that for now? You criminalizing me? Do you hear them say that? In Canada, if you're not a citizen, to be able to get a temporary work visa and other types of status or preferences in terms of being here as a visitor, you have to have your photograph taken and you have to be fingerprinted. There's no hue and cry about criminalization of anybody. It is to protect the integrity of the system, to protect the integrity of the process. And anyone who stands up and beats his chest and talk about the criminalization of persons because you are trying to get the system fair and quite frankly, you're trying to ensure that those who vote are those who identify as a certain individual, and you are opposed to that, that tells us everything we need to know about the commitments to electoral reform. This is not electoral reform. What we have existing now, the mentality, is a bastardization of electoral reform. We have, under the guise of leadership, a cynical and capricious attempt to institute a set of laws that legitimize fraud in elections. And if we allow that to continue, we are doomed, whether you like it or not. Thank you.
Yes, thanks, Dr. Andre. Let me just remind our listeners who are with us and joining us on Facebook and the other platforms that we are in fact discussing drugs and guns and crime and law enforcement and national security. We are looking at that, and Dr. Andre is making the connections, all of that, all of those things that is illustrating there. But I want to go to Simeon Joseph. Simeon, well, I know that you had some difficulty logging in, and I'm glad that you could make it. We really need you for your sociologist point of view on this whole question of drugs and crime and law enforcement and so on, national security. I'm sure you'll want to, as you take up, to say a word to Pastor Rodney on his latest achievement. But certainly, Simeon, let's get into the subject, the real subject now, and that we're talking about here tonight.
Okay, well, good night, Pastor Randy. Good night, Dr. Andre. Good night, everyone. And I could say, I think I'll defer to the title of pastor Um, for me, that is the most supreme accolade, you know. Yeah. So, but nonetheless, I have to steal a moment to congratulate my good friend and brother and mentor and colleague, and I don't know how many things, Pastor Randy. I mean, it's well deserving. I followed it on YouTube, and I distinctly remember him telling me some time ago, a few years ago, if my memory serves, he was doing something, but it slipped my mind. And when I saw it on YouTube, I said, next time I see him, I have to congratulate him. But here he is in person. And so, heartfelt congratulations to you. Um, like Dr. Andrew said, it's always good when we can step up uh, the summit for greater learning. And I am one person who I'm grievously disappointed by the, uh, how to put it, cadastral basket of people in Dominica with bachelors and masters and doctorate and almost mean nothing. Academia is supposed to enhance society. Academia is supposed to expand on knowledge and involvement in national development. And I think too many people have accolades as a badge of honor rather than an investment in national development. So, but I know that's not going to be you, without a doubt. I've worked with you, we've collaborated, we've challenged, and I know for sure that your knowledge gained and your academic credentials obtained will redound to the benefit of those whom you serve, those whom you interact with, those whom you choose to inspire and lead, and those whom you, every aspect of Dominican life, in recent years, doctorate has become peppermint and Logan tablet. And people think, that kind of thing.
The fellas, the fellas
Calling, calling them, calling them,
are
calling themselves doctor when they have to purchase it. And there are many people I know in my own lifetime who actually cheated their way to obtaining their doctorates, And I was at a function the other day and out of Dominica, and there was this Dominican of ambassadorial rank who met some people for the first time, and they asked him, what is his name? He said, just call me doctor. Just call me doctor. It's as if to say, you're nobody. The only thing to your name is you have a credential behind your name, but as I always say in Indian, I always tell people I always ascribe my greatest credentials to FTTB. Not to say too much about it. And you can have PhD, MA, MSc, BSc, BA, but the greatest credential is FTTB, and that's for the time being. So whatever we are in life is for the time being. And that's why when we walk this earth for the time being, we try to be our best. And I know you have obtained your doctorate, but you are fully aware that you're on this earth for the time being, and that you are doing your best to plant your little seed where you are, where your garden is, and to bloom where you are planted. Suffice it to say. So, with all of this being said, to address the topic at hand tonight, one has to be mindful of what you would call impending. I want to term it as an impending mystery, because I've been thinking about it for the day. And from yesterday, when you asked me to, how would I coin the situation of lawlessness and crime? And I see it as an impending mystery. And why I say impending is basically it tells me we don't know where Dominica is going to end up tomorrow. But we can see it before us based on what is happening now, that there is going to be an impending situation where the law and justice and safety and security may not exist. Let's hope it does not come to that. because there's no doubt Dominica is a failed state. Again, when you look at the three branches of government, the executive has fallen through the cracks. The legislature is amok. I mean, when you look at the last sitting of the House of Assembly, the amount of distaste that came to my mouth, I wanted to vomit. Because of the fact that when you listen to what is uttered in the House of Assembly, the highest court of the land, the trivial, childish, kindergartenish, creche kind of atmosphere that is created, leaves one to wonder. People talking about rum, and people talking about throwing stone, and people talking about brothels and all those kind of things there. So you can see, so the legislature in Dominica is one that leaves much to be desired. And then we have the judiciary, which I can tell you in all intents and purposes, when you look at every arm of the judicial system and the security of the state, I was the other day talking to a policeman who was echoing to me sentiments of, he's just in the police force to make a salary. No, because even if he tries to be a good policeman, the atmosphere in the police force does not encourage adhering to the principles of protecting and serving or living up to the standards of upholding the law. All around is a mess of corruption and commerce and bribery and that kind of thing. So that's one. Then you talk about the fact that there's no doubt that drugs and illegal money laundering and illegal entry of firearms and instruments of destruction are pervasive in our society. And then there is no doubt that I'm saying it here. I mean, I could be taken up by the Bar Association, but when you talk to the average Kawat on the road and what they tell you, our lawyers in Dominica, 90% of them are corrupt and have been compromised. Because it's strange enough, when you speak to some of these grassroots fellas and they tell you what their lawyers tell them and what their lawyers tell them they can do, and the conversations they have with lawyers to escape from crime, is very frightening. Okay? And the fact that we have such a growing legal fraternity in Dominica and they are dumb, mute, vocabulary less of saying anything when it comes to the threats that overarching the justice system in Dominica. And then we hear the repeated pronouncements of magistrates and people from the office of legal arms of government that are compromised and corrupt. So that's why I say impending mystery. And the mystery is basically, how are we going to come out of it? Like I said in some programs ago, I think Quo Vadis Dominica. Quo Vadis Dominica. It's a Latin phrase for where are we going to, what's going to come out of Dominica. But in the midst of that, I'll be quick to say there's a glimmer of hope. I listened to Thea Lafont today and yesterday, and I think that there are sprinklings of good people in Dominica. And it's sad that Dominica has been compromised. The banking system has been compromised, the legal system has been compromised, the business system, the police, our teachers, our nurses, our policemen, that kind of thing. Everybody has been compromised, but not everybody. I've even heard of pastors being compromised selling marijuana. That shocked me, that kind of thing. So the question is, the mystery, I think, has to be one of concern, but greater than that, an infusion of hope. Because we have to be people of hope. In the midst of anything that seeks to threaten us, we have to be hopeful. There's a verse in Corinthians, I think Pastor Rodney can help me. We are troubled but not destroyed. And I'm hoping that even if what we're going through now in terms of crime and violence in Dominica, and I'm mindful of the fact as well, I don't know if you heard of the young man that Matt interviewed sometime last week or week before on the Bayfront.
Yes,
That's a very sad story. Very sad story. And he revealed a number of things. School children are going to certain coups in Dominica. Women are going into certain places in Dominica. He revealed tons of information, which I think Matt missed in many ways, as he usually does. But nonetheless, I mean, it was very frightening listening to this young man. The confessions that he said people were disappearing. Fellows were just being disappearing. Fellows were being disappeared for an ounce and this. And if that thing is replayed, the amount of evidence that came out on the situation of drugs and crime in Dominica, it's frightening. But again, I would like to say that, and even with him, the fact that he could come out and the fact that he could speak and the fact that he could say in the end he wants to get out of it, I think that is where hope lies. I think that is where the glimmer of a spark of the divine can be infused in that mystery and say, in spite of the seemingly broken, fractured, undermined system of justice that we have in Dominica, there is that glimmer of hope in our artists, in our sportsmen, in our musicians, and even in people who have been lost, who are looking to be found. And that is where I think people like Pastor Rodney comes in, because again, he might be one of those who hold on the beacon and the torch. We just come the Olympics, right? If we have to make an analogy, a symbolic analogy, the Olympic torch and the earning of the gold medal, I think that is where people like Pastor Rodney will come in to carry that torch, to run the race of that shedding light, so that we can attain that, achieve that gold medal of stability and comfort and security and safety. And I end there as my opening.
Thanks a lot for that, Simeon. And you have given us a good way for me to really segue into Doctor. Well, you said you prefer pastor than doctor. You think pastor is superior to doctor. So I'll just say Pastor Rodney. All right. And in some places, they don't even call him Pastor Rodney, they call him Pass. And I think he preferred that. So I'll just say Pass. Now, here's what it is. You see, Simeon has given us this thing here, which I think is just fantastic. I mean, the way he's looked at it and analyzed it, created the framework for all of that, what we're going to look at, Rodney. Because, you see, we have living examples of all these problems in Dominica. When we talk about, for example, crimes at all levels, Simeon telling us, yes, it's crime at all levels. And he mentioned some of the sectors of society and all the levels. Crimes against humanity. I'm sure, Pastor Ronnie, you're going to give us examples of that. The crimes on the streets, you know, people everywhere just smoking marijuana and puffing in people's face, and the police have the law which say they're not supposed to be, and they're doing it. Nobody is enforcing the law. We don't know what crimes, drug-related crimes. Yes, the minister is talking about, well, they're going to eliminate drugs coming into the back door and so on, and you know. But the point is, the crimes that are there now, the drugs that are there now, nothing is being done about it. And then, of course, the domestic crimes, Pastor Rodney, I'm pretty sure we can talk about these domestic crimes, this abuse, property crimes. You have people getting property and they're not paying the fees that they should pay. So the failure to apply the law to preserve our national security, all of those is what we're talking about, Pastor Rodney. So maybe I can go to you, Pastor Rodney, because I'm sure based on all of the work that you've been doing, you know, and all of the people who have been commenting on you, you have been helping them out. Because somebody, as this young man that Simeon just spoke about, he wants to get out of it. He said to Matt, if I can get out of it today, I will do anything to get out of it, but there's nowhere to go. Pastor Rodney.
Well, thank you again. And Simeon, I love your perspective on the whole question of the doctorate and academia. I really love that. You are a real friend, and I appreciate your comments very, very much. I shared with Mr. G earlier on that I actually said to my church a few days ago that, you know, I'm affectionately known as Pass. That's what I intend to do. And really and truly, I didn't feel any different after I put the gown and I was given the certificate. I had a pizza after that, and I felt the same way. I checked it out, so there's no difference in the person. So thanks quite some for your comments on the subject, though. Mr. G, I agreed to come on this, and I told you I'm on vacation as well. I'm taking a bit of vacation with my wife, and I asked her permission for me to be here tonight. And because to me, honestly, this is an extremely important subject, and important to the extent that I am really convinced that many more people must sit back and pay some attention to what's happening. Today, I had a conversation with someone who thought I was in Dominica, who felt that I should, go to find a young lady to have a conversation with her, because this young lady was abused. And I'm giving you context for what I'm about to say. She was abused at about 8 years by her mother's boyfriend, I understand. She went to a certain place for a job. She has, come out of college, and she went for a job, and she's working. And the manager approached her to say that from now on, your job will include coming to my home to work at nights. Now, that traumatized the young lady. The young lady, is totally broken. But that gentleman is an upstanding gentleman in society. Okay. Not too long ago, before I traveled, I spoke to a young man who has been admitted for drug-induced psychosis. And that is coming out of what I believe to be the government's irresponsible decision some time ago with the whole question of cannabis. And so we can list them. The work that we've been doing is helping people who can't help themselves. Now, when we talk about the question of justice, it is supposed to be a system where we are impartial, where we have the same rights, where the justice is fair, is done fairly. I can say without fear of contradiction that in Dominica, that is nowhere close to what justice should be, right? Nowhere close. And there are too many instances for this. And I agree with Simeon that this crime thing and injustice is all through the institutions. If I understand that very correctly, and I'm sure Simeon or Dr. Andre will help me with this, the whole question of national security, for example, is not just defense of a geography. It is defense of citizens, the economy, and institutions. Now, when you look at the corrupting vices of our institution by money players, what are we left with? Not too long ago, I went to a secondary school and spoke to third form students, and the boys said to me to my face, their mothers are wasting money sending them to school, right? They are third formers. One of the boys said, well, I go to Guadeloupe, I go to Martinique on Friday afternoon, I come back on Sunday afternoon, and I make $10,000. What am I coming to school for? Okay, now, when you think about the figures, the immediate figures, I want to be in that boy's place to make $10,000 in a weekend, right? When you think of this boy's life and what is involved in, you are frightened, okay? So where we are is dangerous, but let me open that up. Where does that come from? What's the context of all the criminality and all the illegality, if you like, and all the injustice? It comes from the top, the governance of the country, where you have institutions being infiltrated, you have systems being broken to satisfy certain people's ego. Mr. G, this thing is so frightening. And Simeon, I do not have a second passport. I understand that some people here may have 3 and 4, but I don't have a second passport.
Simeon, they're talking about, not me.
Well, no, I didn't mention any names. I don't know why you jump in like that. I mean,
I just wanted-
so for me, I am duty bound to do what I'm doing in Dominica. I don't have a choice because I need not only myself to survive, I need my children to survive. I need to see the people who I lead to survive, and the people who we assist with little things, Simeon, that they can't buy for themselves. People are approaching the reopening of school, and some of them can't buy school books. They can't do this, they can't do that. But you have programs everywhere. I saw an ad where the parliamentary representative for the Roseau Central constituency is having an event, a back-to-school event to give things to people. But right within the Roseau Central constituency, you have the poorest of the poor who can't send their children to school. They can't put a tarpaulin in their house and so on. You have that kind of injustice that finds its root in the governance of the country. And quite frankly, I don't even want to glorify, speak of some of the things that's happening in Parliament, because I just feel I'll be glorifying it, the crap that's happening in Parliament from the whole of the office of the Prime Minister down. And I mentioned on our program last night that I was just dumbfounded when I listened to Q95 with one of the companies doing, how they call it, an advert, this time that they have, and repeating the nonsense of the parliamentary representative for the Roseau South constituency, who says that BB rum is our national rum, advertising their company saying that come and buy BB rum because it's our national rum. I mean, that's where we are. That's where we are. How do we get out from that? It means that a few of us need to do quite some work, right? It means that we have to call it out when it's wrong. It means that we have to go beyond just saying in our closets that the persecution of Thompson Fountain and Lennox Linton and Edison James is not justice. Why is not justice? Because we have heard people within the executive branch of government make worse statements than that. Case in point, the Prime Minister just issued a threat, if you ask me, when he spoke about the electoral reform out of Parliament. He issued a threat to the citizens of Dominica. And that's not the first time he's doing that. And I do not think that the police has interviewed him. Yet, a few years ago, I said on my program that there are some things that are more powerful than stones. And the then police commissioner called me into his office and wanted to how you call that, bring all his top police officers to frighten me. And in his office, I went. I mean, just that I could share with him that I want to hear what you're saying and then put you back in your place, right? But he wanted to say to me that is inciting violence, right? Whereas we hear it being said everywhere else. What do we do about that? Well, I'm going to borrow from Dr. Andre as well, that we have to now do more than radio talk. Okay, we have to go beyond radio talk, and radio talk is good, it is important, it is necessary to educate some people, but very often we're preaching to the choir, right? We have to now get to the place where we get into the trenches to explain some of that to some people. Let them know what that is vis-a-vis where you are, right? In my commendation of TLR from last night, I also said that the government is in the habit of promising people stuff, giving them a piece of paper without giving them any legal access. Okay, and I just asked, and somebody called me and said, well, why are you getting on the government snoop? I said, I'm not getting on the government snoop. I'm just asking the government, if you have done this, do it properly. Make sure that the young lady have a title deed for the piece of land that you're giving her, unlike all the apartments and houses that you have given to people, that you loan them, because if they speak too loud about your government, or if whatever happens, you transfer, you move them out, and get somebody else in, right? But that's where we are. So the question of justice must be dealt with from that perspective. A couple of the things, though, that I think that is important for us to view in that regard. In 2018, and Simeon said we have done some work together. Yes, we have done quite some work together. In 2018, I believe we came out with a document with 52 recommendations, if my memory serves me right, Simeon, from the Interdenominational Committee on Crime and Violence, presented to the government. That was in 2018. One of them was a gun amnesty, but I'm just using that as an example. And we presented to the government a gun amnesty from an example in Jamaica. Okay, it wasn't, somebody putting out something out of their hat. And we shared with them what the success rate was in Jamaica and what we propose the success rate to be, if it's done the way that we're proposing it. Let me tell you something. The Commissioner of Police, even the President and the Minister of Security, guess what? Tore that thing apart and said to us what nonsense we're coming up to them with. Now, what have we seen? Well, they tried gun amnesty in the way they wanted to do it, and they didn't bring in a knife.
If I may interject,
Yes.
quote unquote, from the words of the then commissioner to the Bishop of Roseau who presented it, that is absolute foolishness.
Right.
That was his exact words.
Thank
Not
you
the
very
present
much.
commissioner, the one who
the
just
last commissioner. No. So that's what they said. But they did two. And they did not bring in a knife. This lawyer, what's his name now? Rosie's son, went to the National Security Minister and said that maybe you should ask the pastors and priests to do this. Very unofficially, he, Father Branca James and Monsignor John Lewis, myself, we held a small press conference under the ministry, right? That was hardly publicized, quite frankly. Guess what? The guns that they recovered, Mr. G, were recovered in that period of time when the pastors and priests were included in that.
So what you're saying is that the guns Mr. Blackmore said they had recovered, these were the guns.
That's correct. That's correct. But here's the irony of this. So whereas the pastors and priests recovered a few guns in that space of time without the voice of the Minister of National Security or the Prime Minister, without their voices, the very 2 weeks later on, the National Security Minister, through his police from the St. Joseph police station, let me use those words carefully, and I'm hoping that Judge Andre will stand for me in the court, distributed more guns and worse guns from the police station in St. Joseph.
Yes.
Right? That is now there, and they cannot tell us where it is. Now, the customs, and I'm giving you another example, interdicted what? 2 shipments of guns into Dominica? Nobody has been questioned for it. Nobody. Now, from the little I know, if a shipment comes into the country, it have a name. It has to be placed on a manifest. Somebody shipped it. It came from an address. What they say, Maui Joseph. And the police is not able to tell us it came from such and such address. That's where somebody lives, and it was addressed to so and so. That's the individual. Now, that's where we are in terms of the whole question of crime and justice. And it is sad that the institutions that are supposed to stand for us, and I include the church, okay? I include the judiciary. You hear the magistrates do what they want sometimes, okay? I include every one of them. The police is as corrupt as they come, right? Why do I say that? I say that because if you can decide a matter, right, in the police headquarters in Roseau and let go some people and then arrest some people for the same thing, then you need to give the public a reason why you are able to do that. And that, in my mind, is corruption at its highest within an institution that is supposed to be here to uphold the law and keep the peace. Okay, and that's what we have. I'm not talking about the ministers of government and their surrogates. I mean, that's where corruption couche, right? In every aspect. My pal rep send me, my pal rep tell you, and so on. That's where corruption couche. And so we have to get to a place where people need to decide enough is enough, and we need this change. And I propose that, and that must be changed with, pretty soon. I'm maybe more optimistic than Simeon is, in that I believe that change is coming. And how do I know that? Well, um, the little I know about my society, and you all can, help me out with this. If you don't trouble dog, it doesn't bark. Okay? When a dog comes at you, it is fearful that you are coming into its territory. And so when you begin to see people get on as though they're about to lose their life, it means that somewhere they understand that the time of their departure is at hand. And I'll rest here for now.
Yes, I'm going to just open up the conversation as you go on. But Dr. Andre, I wanted to first, and I will ask Lambi as the calls, you can start taking some calls. As the calls come in, just make us a sign, Lambi, and we'll take the calls, okay? If you're hearing us, just let me know. But Dr. Andre, I suppose when Pastor Rodney said, say, like couche or something like that, I think he's talking about lying down. I don't know what that has to do with anything, but he was talking about corruption in high places. So maybe you might be able to interpret that, because he did say that you are his lawyer. In case anybody tell him anything, he'll send them to you. But I mean, isn't that a dismal picture that we see? These are what Dr. Pastor Rodney and Stephen talk about, the actual things, actual occurrences taking place at all
But
levels.
it's even worse. I mean, to the extent it can get worse, it's even worse. I know you are still young, but let's go back a few years ago. A trial in Portsmouth. I think Tieni Bienzin was the magistrate. I think the trial involved some conscientious patriots going up to these villas, and one of the local acolytes pulled out a gun. And during the course of a trial, the either chief of police or the acting chief of police, I'm not sure which one, doesn't really matter, asked that gun, which was marked as an exhibit during the course of the trial, mind you, be returned to the accused, whose license to have that gun had expired, not renewed. A chief of police, during a trial, seeking to return a gun marked as an exhibit to the accused. So what do you expect? And it just by sheer coincidence that the accused was a close confidant of the prime minister. So how can we complain, Nagaso? How can we talk about unequal justice when that is happening before our very eyes? What do we expect? If there is unequal enforcement of the law, then we can talk about capital punishment until the cows or the goats come home. No change will happen. If you are emboldened to commit an offense because you believe that because of your political affiliation you will not be prosecuted, then what do you expect? It becomes a license to commit criminal activity, because somehow you believe that you're above the law. If you believe that appearing before certain judicial officers, your chances of being released is greater than it otherwise should be, then the whole thing becomes a mockery. the system of governance and justice is being undermined by some of the very players within that system. This is not some foreign attack against our justice system. This, unfortunately, is by design, orchestrated to send a message to those loyalists and supporters. As long as you are with us, there is a blanket of immunity which we've cast over your shoulders, and you have nothing to fear. And that is part of the grip, the iron grip that the Directorate has over hundreds of people within Dominica. If hypothetically you are known to pass bad checks, all you have to do is go on radio and sing how great thou art, and nothing will happen to you. If you are known to run roughshod over the rights of others, then all you need to do is start to proclaim how great thou art, and next thing you're on the Police Services Commission. The fox is guarding. What is the fox guarding again, Gasso? The hens, the little pullets. That's what's happening. This is not even a matter of euphemistically saying you have square pegs in round holes. No, not at all. It's worse than that. You have those who've sought shelter and who have been sheltered from prosecution are being led into the very den of iniquity. And this is the state that we've descended into. Persons on radio crying, give me my compensation, pay me for what you've taken. Not a word. There are dozens of Dominicans who are owed by the political directorate. IPOs. I heard a figure of over $110 million still owing to persons. Many of these persons cannot open their mouths. Because if they do, kiss that money goodbye. They will be given a mark of the beast. And mark will be put on their foreheads because they have breached the code of silence. Sounds like the mafia, doesn't it? Omerta. Silence. There was one political hack on radio. He fled to Antigua. Who would euphemistically say, we liberites, we don't talk about our problems in public. You're right, you don't. And you don't for a reason. Because you're afraid of the sort of retribution which would fall over your head if you start betraying, if you start telling conscientious patriots where the bodies of fraudulent behavior are buried. But I'm an eternal optimist. A few days ago, there was an announcement which, in my view, although it was muted but spoke volumes, there are certain Dominicans, you have two of them on your program this evening, Mr. G, including yourself, who are prepared to do what it takes to restore this island to its former glory. They have initiated a lawsuit seeking the adjudication of the issue, where hundreds of millions of dollars from the proceeds of sale of Dominican passports are disappearing, according to Zampoli, or whatever his name is. I think Blessing said Zandoli, but I disassociate myself with Blessing's pronunciation of the name. In mysterious accounts, an effort is being made to repatriate the taxpayers' dollars, to ensure that people are given a fair shake, to build their homes, to repair their homes, to send their children to school, to earn a living, to start a little business, given a fair shake in their own country, for God's sake. That's the history we want to learn about. Empowering Dominicans in their own lands. Not having them stand on a side, or young people smoking marijuana from night to day or day to night. Persons trying to eke out a living. The history that we want to know is Dominicans being empowered. I heard a newscast regarding Guyana some time ago, and I think it was indicating that last year, Guyanese workers Can't remember the figure, so I may be off mark. Got an 8% increase. This year they got a similar increase. Next year they will get a much higher increase on account of the increase in the oil proceeds. In other words, the wealth of the country is being shared among the people. Give them a break, an opportunity to do well. Not even as well as you, because that will never happen in 5 lifetimes. $64,000 a month rent, guys. When you have people who still have tarpaulins over their roofs, people getting social insurance of $200, $300, $400, $500 a month, and you see nothing wrong with that, and you're allocating to yourself a 50 or 30% increase in wages, whatever it is, and that doesn't include the other benefits that you receive given your position. Driving in air-conditioned luxury, while persons cannot even afford a bus ride from their village to the city. What a sad state of affairs. Very soon, there will be, and I hope I'm not betraying anybody's confidence, the publication of a book of poems by Edward Oliver LeBlanc. And when you read those poems, you just nod your head and you shake your head in disgust. What kind of man was this to talk about the philosophy of life, to talk about the meaning of life, the value of life, what should be treasured, the value system that should be treasured, as opposed to the money you've accumulated, the number of houses that you have hidden in the names of relatives, the ostentation, the vulgar indulgence. You read these poems, you say it is only after someone moves on, the transition, that we understand the true value of that individual. We have to reclaim that value. We have to reclaim that history, because that is the only way we can redeem ourselves, and we can cast aside that immorality which pervades us from top to bottom. We can confine it to the dustbin where it deserves to be thrown, just like a brown paper bag filled with tens of thousands of US dollars was, quote unquote, thrown into the garbage. Thanks.
Yes, Pastor Rodney, and I want to, as we said, we're going to open up, and I want to go to Sasimian first. But really and truly, the question somebody asked, two things. Pastor Rodney said, look, we're going to do something about it. I think that's what has to happen. Yes, we have to talk and educate and keep working, and but we have to do something about it. Here's some of the things that we've heard in terms of things that have happened. I remember for quite some time I've been hearing a certain person talking about this constitutional cool wash brigade. Why is it nobody questioned that person and they want to question Pastor Rodney when he said a little thing? What kind of justice system do we have? As Pastor Rodney was saying, when several people have been charged with incitement, and as soon as one person goes across to the other side, that charge is dropped. And about 2 or 3 people, those charges will drop. Why is it that you cannot drop all the charges? Why you must only charge those persons who are your political opponents? That cannot make sense. Somebody sent me a little note there on WhatsApp saying that in connection with this particular incitement charges on Thompson Fountain and Lennox Linton and so on, somebody said the Minister of Security stated in Parliament that legal services had to be sought outside of Domingo to avoid political interference. I've been hearing that millions of dollars are being paid to this outside legal services.
Nonsense.
You understand what I'm saying? And so then the minister was asked, and I think it was on a program on Q, he was asked, well, what about the charges brought against Dr. Fountain on Q? Isn't that the same thing as that was brought against other people? And he said, well, he says he cannot comment on that. I mean, what kind of a justice system is that? You are hiring people outside, paying them millions of dollars. They're not doing anything at all because none of these cases have been resolved. There is no case. In fact, there is no case in any of those cases. There's no substance. There's no evidence. And yet you're paying all this money and they ask you a question. Simeon, it seems to me it's important for us to look now at what we're going to do about this, because it seems to me, as I think it was Dr. Andrew who said, that he sees a glimmer of hope. I really hope that is so, because really and truly, this thing can't go on forever. It's been going on too long, and people are suffering in the country. And Pastor Ron, you can jump in anytime while we're talking now, because we can just get the conversation going. Simeon, you need to unmute.
Yeah, well, Mr. Gregoire,
For some reason, your audio.
Simeon, you mute again.
Yes.
yeah. So we have a judge in the house, in the person of Dr. Andre, and perhaps I could defer to him in trying to unravel the question that you're asking. But you see, to me, at the heart of the question that you're asking is a word called justice. That's why I said there's a judge in the house. And the last I checked, I think justice is supposed to be, and bear me out, Dr. Andre, an ethical, philosophical idea that people are treated, right, impartially and fairly and properly and reasonably. That's what justice is. It's an idea. It's a philosophical notion that in the sphere and in the realm of things, everybody, every human being is supposed to be treated with fairly, properly, equally, etc. And there is no doubt, we can see now in Dominica that we are absent of this, totally absent of this. One of the, if I may say so, one of the spiritual interpretations of justice, unfortunately, is a word we call karma. It's a word we call karma. And if we were to juxtapose this philosophical, ethical idea of what justice is, with what in spirituality is karma, that should warn people who want to be unjust. You understand what I'm telling you? That should warn people who want to think, well, okay, that justice is in their hands and they can do what they want with people, forgetting that there's a supreme judge, okay, who is not only philosophically fair, right? He's absolutely fair. F-A-I-R. He reigns supreme over any human institution. So when human beings think that they can do what they want with God's children, God has a way of dealing with people who treat his own unfairly. That to me, that is what karma is. To some extent, although it is really an Eastern concept. Okay? Far Eastern concept. But, all these questions that we raised tonight are very real. Because when you have to go through the chronology of the unfair treatment of people by the justice system of Dominica, what I'm speaking about should sound as a warning, to those policemen and magistrates and judges and ministers of national security and cabinet ministers and leaders of the state and government who think that they can do what they want with people. That sooner or later they have to answer for it. And that is a stark warning, Sooner or later they have to answer for it. And there are living examples of it, I have seen many people in Dominica who have treated people unfairly. When you see them today, people say, hélas. But when you know the history of what they have done to people, all you have to say is, there go I, but for the grace of God. Because you know the things they have done to people when they were magistrates, when they were policemen, when they had authority and power. And you see them today. And if that is not a living example to them of Moje, let me be fair. Let me have a certain sense of equality. Let me not be vindictive. Let me treat people fairly. Let me treat people equally. Okay? And if that doesn't sound a warning to them, then what will? Because nonetheless, we have to look at it. I mean, there are so many situations in Dominica and Pastor Rodney alluded to so many of them. Somebody arrested for this crime, and they face the court, they face the law, and they face the judgment. Someone else is arrested for the same crime, and there's nothing being done about it. They're not even arrested. We had a case of a minister of government, a sitting minister of government or parliamentary representative or some high government person who was, arrested for an illegal crime. And he was given back of house royal treatment for bail. And you've had other people who have been arrested on allegations and have had to sleep in the jail, not granted bail. And time goes on, there are people who have committed murder in Dominica. Lives have been lost. And today they're driving Mercedes-Benz and Hondas and BMWs, and they're building big houses. And they can fly in and out in spite of the fact that you know that their passports are supposed to be confiscated. And they are given government contracts with their caterpillars and their dumpers while they are awaiting a murder trial. And other people have been arrested for allegations of things, and their cases cannot be called. And when they are called, they are given harsh sentences. And that is why I have to say, I have to call on justice, because one thing I would always say is I hope that people who are treated unfairly in Dominica are really walking with their knees on the ground. I know Pastor Rodney is not a Catholic, but and while they are walking with their knees on the ground, they are rolling their rosaries and saying their psalms for deliverance. Because you know something, it's not easy to go through political victimization, It's not easy when you think of what people like Lennox Linton and Daniel Lugay and ordinary people who are arrested for marching in the streets of Rosary on a Wednesday. People have been arrested for trying to overthrow the government with a truck. And there are people who overthrew governments in Dominica and became president of Dominica. There were people who led armed rebellion. Anybody who went back to 1979 will tell you people's houses were stoned, firebombed. They were harassed, and these people eventually went on to become president of Dominica, the chief architect of violent, and even prime minister at some point. Because I literally and visually saw Rosie Douglas with chainsaws in Benson and Zimmy. These people like Edison George and Gregory Grell and those kind of people, guys from Calibishi, sawing trees and branches of trees and putting across the road. It's not something somebody told me. These things I've seen. Never arrested, never stood trial. And you have people going on trial for 12 years or more for trying to do it with a truck. And the truck that was used on that day, how many years ago? There are trucks 10 times the size of Dominica, marching up Dominica roads, where two vehicles cannot even pass. When they blow their horn, houses tremble and shake. And you're coming to tell me today that these people cannot have fair trial, and you're spending millions of dollars, people being brought before the court. And the thing about it is that you're in cases being nully-prossed for want of persecution. Why? Because lawyers don't show up and policemen don't show up. And you have a prosecutor who's not showing up from Trinidad time after time after time after time, and the case is being postponed. Does that make any sense? And so the warning has to be, if we're talking about justice, the warning has to be that the people who are using their minds and their hands to impact injustice on people must know that there's something called karma. And they have to think, if they have children, especially if they have young children, they have to be careful. Because what legacy of injustice are they heaping like hot coals on the heads of their descendants? Because the scripture tells you that the sins of the father will fall on the children. So all these policemen and magistrates and lawyers and ministers of government who think that they are doing people harm because they are in power today, the day will come. The day will not come when the day might come when the act of God will exact mercy, because we are told in Micah, what does God expect of us now? To act justly, to love tenderly, and to walk humbly. And what we're seeing is the antithesis of all of this. Huh? People are not acting justly to their fellow men, especially when they have power and authority. And throughout scripture, it says, when you have power and authority, I do not give you power and authority to lord it over others. I give you power and authority to serve. And there comes in Micah 6:8b, to love tenderly. When you have authority, love should be outpouring from your heart to your fellow man, because you have been put in a position to make people's lives better. So love should be pouring from your heart, not hate, not malice, not division. And then to walk humbly. It's not because you're in position you have to be proud and lauding. Not because you're a magistrate you think because people come before you have to be like Pontius Pilate and say, do you know that I have the authority to set you free or to crucify you while you sit on your high throne? That those of us who have the pen of ministers of national security have to understand it. Because you have the pen of national security in Dominica, that doesn't mean you have to be haughty. Huh? And you have to be lording your position over people. That those of us who think that, okay, because we are in army fatigue or combat fatigue or a police uniform, that will protect us. No. And that is why often I beckon to people, and I certainly hope that people who are victimized in Dominica are praying, you know. Because if they're not praying, crap will smoke their pipe. If you are innocent, you have to pray. Then if you are innocent and you're not praying, then you know your retributive justice will be distant from you. And that's all I'll say on the matter.
Well, Simeon, here's the thing. I noticed you start talking about praying. You start talking about scripture. You start talking about karma. I feel that now I have to get a contribution from Pastor Rodney. Because you see, Pastor Rodney, all of those things that people were talking about, that all of us are talking about and pointing out, Dr. Andre included. Our Calypsonians witnessed all of those things and they wrote them in the history of the Calypsos. And you listen to Calypsos from Dice and all these things that Pat has written, historically they've written about those things. They're there. Didn't Bob write a song about Camel? Yes, it's there. He's telling us, but politicians are not listening. So, Pastor Rodney, we really will welcome your contribution at this time. And I want you to go back to what you originally said, what we're going to do about it.
Yeah, I want to first read a scriptural text here, Simeon, because it is a reflection of where we are, right? In Isaiah chapter 59, God is talking to the nation about how terrible things are. He says, your iniquities have separated you from me. Then he says, no one calls for justice, nor does any plead for truth. They trust in empty words and speak lies. They conceive evil and bring forth iniquity. And then later down, and I'm just scanning through that. In verse 9, it says, therefore justice is far from us, nor does righteousness overtake us. We look for light, but there is darkness. But here is what I believe is the crux of all of this. In verse 14 and through to 15, the scripture says, justice is turned back and righteousness stands afar off. For truth is fallen in the street and equity cannot enter. So truth fails. And he who departs from evil makes himself a prey. And I want you to note that, Simeon. He who departs from evil makes himself a prey. Then the Lord saw it, and it displeased him that there was no justice. One of the things that I'm confident about is that God is not like man. And God acts. God comes out and he does what he must do. And that is why I'm optimistic. I'm optimistic because I see the signs of God acting. And one of the signs that God is acting is that he have a way of putting confusion in the midst of the people who think that injustice is how they live. And they fight between themselves and they walk between themselves. And so I am confident that that's going to break. A few weeks ago, I was having a conversation with someone, and the individual is a very strong proponent of the incumbent government. And in conversation with the three of us, somebody asked him, "What is your advice now for me as a person?" And we were not talking politics then. He said, I am a good businessman, doing very well outside of Dominica, but I want to come back to invest in Dominica. Here's his answer. Please, don't come back to Dominica. Dominica is at a dead end. You know what happened to me? At the time, I had to ask for the Lord's mercy. Because if you allow your physique to respond, you collar him. I mean, I don't know if you guys know that word, but you collar him and make sure you fix him up good and proper. Because for me, that's where I live. That's where I want to live. And you tell somebody else, while you're a proponent of the incumbent government, you tell somebody else, please don't come back here to invest your money because Dominica is at a dead end. That was a shocker. But that also said to me that it has become a dead end for them because as far as they're concerned, the walls are closing in. Why? The walls are closing in because when you have done all this injustice for all that time, it has to bite you. You have made yourself a prey to it, right? You have made yourself a prey to injustice. The Bible is always right. What you sow, you are going to reap, right? Is it one of the reggae singers who says, whatever you sow lives with you, right? Well, the Bible says what you sow, you are going to. It didn't say somebody reap it for you. You are going to reap. And I'll give you one personal instance. A few years ago, when my Kingdom Connection was in the morning, Mr. G, you remember that Friday morning, I was in a particular job and I left to go to Kingdom Connection and come back. I had a contract that says that I didn't have to apply for leave. So there was no leave specified in my contract. And I went to that program, and on my talking points commentary, I remember that very clearly. I made a statement then when you recall at the time Lennox Linton was in a court and he had lost the case against the accountant, the auditor, and people were raising funds for him and so on. And I made a point, three things. One, if you defame someone and you did it wrongfully, you should pay the price. Two, I am impressed and heartened that there are people who are standing for something because they believe in what Lennox Linton is doing. And they have put their lives in to support him in raising the funds. And I said, number three, somebody must account for the millions of dollars that has been spent in Eli River under the aegis of building a hotel or whatever it was, and we have nothing there for $120 million. Somebody must be made to pay for that. Well, the program ended at 11:30. I think it used to end at the time. By 12 o'clock, the minister, reborn, called my son's boss, who was at the time working for government, and asked that he be summarily dismissed. Okay, now he wasn't permanent on the establishment, but he was working there on contract, doing the helping with the law reform, whatever they have there. And he had just received his evaluation that I felt was out of this world. Simeon, you work for government, and I don't know how they calculate this thing, but this guy evaluation was showing that he had scored more than 100, over 100. Right? That didn't sound right to me. Ask him to go back to your boss and look at it. But he was sent home. And let me tell you something. My mother, God bless her soul, she's dead now, and my mother-in-law, they put down some prayers, Simeon, for Rayburn Blackmore. I am sure that God answers their prayers. And that which will come to him, he will feel exactly as my son felt when he was asked to drop everything immediately, leave and go home without a job. Now, I believe profoundly in what God does, and I have no doubt in my mind that these guys will reap so bad that some of us will be walking Roseau when Justice Andre come down to get some fresh air. He'll be looking to see, but who's this guy over here? And they will tell him it's so and so. He'll say, but I don't believe this. You got the wrong guy. But it will be the same guy, because justice would have eaten them up, because they would have made injustice, so much injustice, that they will become the prey to that thing.
I know that Dr. Andre knows something about this justice business there.
As though you're right.
That's what going to be most OT.
You got some, sir? You got some, sir? Look, I mean, you're right. We can preach until the cows meander in the meadows. We can point out what many people or most people know is wrong. And hopefully many people take solace and encouragement from the likes of Pastor Rodney and Simeon Joseph and others who faithfully call the radio station and so on. And yes, sometimes we think they talk too much. But suffice it to say that if their voices were stilled, then what would happen? What would happen? From whence would we seek encouragement? From whence would the forces of good stand the possibility of triumph? From whence would people take courage to walk on Wednesdays? Who would motivate those voices? Who would give people the little courage, knowing full well that their rewards will be persecution and ostracism and criticism and even job deprivation? That, unfortunately, is a sad reality. I heard Pastor Rodney a couple of years ago speak about the treatment to his son. As we used to say growing up in Possible, perhaps they just don't like his head. Probably they like other parts of his body, but not his head. And that is being replicated and repeated all over. And that is the language of coercion, the language of intimidation. If you don't join us, you will pay the price. And when more of us stand united, we are encouraged, and we make the possibility of dreaming, not just dreaming, the possibility of a different world even more clearer through concerted action, through standing. And this is a very difficult time worldwide when people are standing for their rights. People are saying, we will not be moved. And the old Liberites in the 60s used to sing like a tree or standing by the river, we shall not be moved. So Dominica should resolve that no longer will they be spectators in their own demise. They cannot be conscripted to act in their own downfall. They should be conscripted by higher powers, powers of righteousness, which should flow like a mighty stream, cleansing the corridors of power, removing the stench of corruption, and setting the captives free. That is what we need. Concerted action to free that lady of democracy and justice, to remove the handcuffs from her, to remove her from that little, 6x8 cell in which she languishes, where she stands tormented by those, quite frankly, who've sold their souls for a mess of potash. So we need some creative change in Dominica. And there will be no white knight giving us this change. The messiahs and the liberators will come from within, from the very bosom of Dominica. But we must create the environment whereby they are emboldened to take up the mantle of struggle, to liberate themselves from not just mental slavery, but financial slavery. Because once you accept those dark currency of deceit and greed, you become tarnished, you become tainted. So that it takes more strength to dissent than to surrender. And our people have to be reminded of this. It takes more effort to stand than to lie prostrate on the ground and say, beat me, because you've given me a house to which I have no title. A house will be snatched from my cold, dead hands within minutes of my death, and the keys are given to the eternal ringmaster. So look at your keys. I wonder what Monsterby said if he had ears to hear. And then he would ask himself, you mean to say for all the efforts I made to prop up this puppet master, that is the thanks I have received? My relatives are treated with disgust. Whatever happened to our former Speaker of the House? Didn't she spend her last months lamenting the manner in which she was treated? The manner in which she was treated like yesterday's newspaper, cast by the wayside. But that is the fate that you've brought upon yourself. And those who have a discerning eye, those who have appreciation of history, will understand, and Pastor Rodney can help me. What are the benefits of sin? What are the wages of sin? What eternal benefit do you derive from them? Except to squeeze your own fellow man, to ground them into the ground. And then, as one of our panelists have said, how sorry it is to see someone who occupied some position in life reduced to a fate where he or she walks aimlessly around the streets of Roseau. Many have lost their minds. What wage is that? What reward is that? So the evidence as to what iniquity will do to you is all over the place. You don't have to even open the Bible. It's right there. It's right there. Because you cannot allow yourself to become your own executioner from a moral perspective. You cannot allow yourself to become the person who is slaying your own value system. You cannot allow yourself to inflict the death punishment on your own values. So when these fellas talk about death punishment for this crime, as we used to say growing up in Portsmouth, that's not joke you're making. Sense could tell you it will not achieve anything. Baby Sarah, where are you? Where are you?
So
That's it.
so you see, Dr. Andre, I have to go back to Simeon, because you see all this karma. We're talking about karma, but people are seeing the karma, It's happening already, It's happening all around them in plain sight. But we got numb to it. And we're still hoping that to get the like something that we've been waiting for 20 years. That is what is happening, Simeon. Simeon, you're muted. So you might want to unmute so you can. I don't know if you're hearing me. All right, I think Simeon is getting organized. If you can unmute.
So no, the thing is,
Yeah.
the thing is, the thing is, the buffering is just getting from bad to worse where I am. I don't understand because you guys are you hearing me clearly?
Very clearly, very clearly, very clearly.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, but so that is why you were breaking up a while ago. So but it for me, as a Dominican, my main concerns are always, the state of the nation state, put it that way, for generations to come. Pastor Rodney said something earlier where he was sort of invited not to return to Dominica. Do you know, Mr. Gregoire, Pastor Rodney, Dr. Andre Lambie, the rest of Dominicans listening, that is the utterance of 8 out of every 10 Dominicans that you meet. They want to go. They want to leave. As a matter of fact, I'll share something with you tonight. It's not a friend of mine. It's not a family member of mine. It's just somebody I know remotely supporting the current government in power. You know what the person told me 3 weeks ago? If this government wins the next election, they're taking their whole family and going. But they will still vote for them. That shocked me. That shocked me. They will still vote for them. But if they win the next election, they are prepared to leave and go. How do you juxtapose that thought? That is what you call complete cognitive dissonance, I was awed. I was awed. I left almost speechless. I couldn't say anything. Because, there's an intrinsic evil in this, At the heart of it, there's a rootedness of some ominous, evilish intent, To say something like, if this, you support the government, and I know that person very well. I know they're strong support of the government. And they have said if Kerrit and the Labour Party win, they are leaving and go because Dominica has nothing for them and their children. And the conversation went on further. They cannot have their children grow up in Dominica like that because things are bleak. And then when I engaged the person, they said, well, even if election is called tomorrow, they will still vote for them. Isn't that devilish? Isn't that evilish? How does one fathom that kind of reasoning? Psychologically, there's a cognitive, somebody isn't thinking straight. There's a certain level of insanity in that statement. A certain level of polarity, how you call I don't know how to put it. And at the heart of it is the sensation that you are seeing evil, you are seeing wrong, but you will, by your very actions, impose wrong on others. That makes it evilish. That makes it devilish. And so that is why I say, for me, it's do you know, Mr. Gregoire, that there are young men in Dominica today, 28, 29, 30 years, who upon leaving high school have never had a job?
That is quite true.
They have graduated from high school. And they have been sitting on the side of the road for 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years. And now what we have done to fill the empty space, we have given him the largesse of smoking marijuana willy-nilly, destroying them further. So they are not employed. They are unemployed, because there's a difference. And they are underemployed in terms of their basic human resource, what they can give to the country. Okay? And by and large, most of these guys, some of them are involved in other, maybe illicit activities. Some of them will never be able to decently, structure their lives, organize their lives. And very soon they'll be 40 years. And for 20 years, they will be sitting on the side of the road. That's the nature and the state of things. And what would have been their accomplishment? Selling marijuana, smoking marijuana. And that's the future. Because they will be fathers of tomorrow. Who knows? The other day I saw a young man who I know was a heavy marijuana smoker. And he's in the police force today. And because I know they take tests and I know they do community research and they go and find out in communities, etc. I know that. And so I questioned him, and how did you end up in the police force? Well, my mother talked to my pal rep. I said, do you want to be a policeman? Do you know what being a policeman? Well, I just there for the time being, you know. And then the conversation went on. I mean, because of the closeness of the family relationship, I don't want to go further, but it's bleak. It's bleak. You know, I've been to the hospital to see sick people and to hear nurses saying, I'm just there to make my money and I don't care if all you get well or if all you sick or if all you get. They say those things openly in the hospital. You know, and there's so many other concerns that we have, but above all, when you look at, and I call them kindergarten, I call them not they have even surpassed kindergarten. They're now creche parliamentarians that we have in Dominica, people who are supposed to be guiding policy, people who are supposed to be bringing up proposals to implement for national development. Don't even know if they're going or coming. You look at some of these young people in ceremonies and on occasions, and honestly, gentlemen, they are lost. They don't even know what they're doing there. And you could call some of them names. You know, you look at this young guy from St. Joseph, and you look at this young lady from Portsmouth, and you look at this young lady from Paybush, and you look at some of these young people who are parliamentary representatives sitting in the government. They look lost. They don't even know what they're doing there. Living purposeless lives when their lives are supposed to be purposeful. So you have on a sundry people, and you have a cadre of people in Dominica who don't really know what they're doing, why they exist, why they live, why they work, why they are policemen, why they are nurses, why they are teachers. They don't know. They don't know the essence of their existence. And on top of it now, you have a situation in Dominica whereby everything is undermined. So my point is the societal structures that are supposed to create that environment whereby our people can have a certain moral compass, okay, can have that internal fiber, can have that moral guidance, and can have that environmental, so to speak, support to become the best of citizens for the country is seriously undermined. And that's why I say my concern is for the nation state. You talk to the average person who has been in the public service for 30 years and they want to run, they want to get out, they cannot wait for their retirement because the new breed and brood of public servants don't know what they are doing there, from permanent secretaries down. So I mean, you know, I mean, it's very concerning, you know. It's very, very, very concerning. And that is creating a more, to end, this is creating a very uncertain, unstable, unsafe, an insecure environment. And that is why we have to be very concerned for the future of Dominica. The instability, the insecurity, the lack of safety, the lack of security, the instability that we're going to inherit in Dominica. But again, I'll be the first to say that we have to look for the glimmers of hope in our society. We have to look for the beacon of light that will create a difference. You know, I happen to know all of Pastor Rodney's children. I can commend them highly. You know, so they are families and they are human beings in Dominica who are productive, who are creative, who are promising, and there are many around. And my concern is we have to make sure that they don't fall through the cracks, because the environment upon which they is expandingly becoming very negative. And so the few who are willing to, as I said, be creative, be productive, be innovative, you know, have that certain level of moral compass. I mean, when you think of it, what has happened to Pastor Rodney's son? Bear with me a little bit. This is a young man. If his father wasn't Pastor Rodney and he went to work one day and he didn't have that moral support, that structure, that environment to go home to where he can feel secure, you know what would have happened? You know what could have happened? I mean, it happened to me in the 1980s when I was valedictorian at grammar school. I know this Minister of Education then called the then principal of grammar school and asked him, why is it that it was the son of Sylvester Joseph who was valedictorian? When I started working in the bank, the Aid Bank, I know the manager of Aid Bank was called and asked, how did I get the job there as a son of a laborite? I know that. And I know, and I can identify with that. It's because of my family structure, my father and everything. When I was going through that, I was able to hold myself together because I know the level of frustration that emanates from having to go through those experiences. Much more for people who are unemployed, have never had a job. You know what I mean? So we have to be very concerned that this, as I said, environment and structure that exists in Dominica is one that is going to guarantee a stable society. And my concern is the growing instability of Dominica. And the few people who have the grasp of holding it together might be either leaving, diminishing, or taking a back step because the forces that are around them are greater. So people say that. There are good people in Dominica who are saying, I want to go. I want to leave. I'm not getting involved. That is there. And then those who are willing to take the chance to stand up, to speak up, to take a position, to articulate their concerns, are being victimized, are being targeted, are being labeled.
Well, this is what we're doing here tonight, Simeon. You know, and it's because we're concerned about all of those things that we discussed the question of guns and drugs and crime and security and so on and law enforcement. We looked at all of that. We're concerned. That's why we're talking about it tonight. Obviously, there might be some backlash for us, but what does it matter? I mean, when you're talking the truth, you speak the truth to power at any time, and your conscience is clear. The thing is that I'll make our closing remarks here tonight. I think it's important for us to do what we're doing. But Simeon, one of the things that you said that was not 100% correct is that you said people are thinking about leaving. People have been thinking. People have been leaving in droves. I mean, you know what I'm talking. Nurses talking about, and teachers, and all kind of professionals. They're leaving in droves, so they're not thinking about leaving. Any opportunity to get to leave, Pastor Rodney. I mean, you can probably bear me out on this. Let's make our final remarks as we start closing.
No, and I'm glad you mentioned that, Mr. G, because that's a fact. People are living in droves, and professionals are living in droves, finding jobs elsewhere and living in droves. And so I want to end where I started, and that is we have to continue to do much more work in that area because, Simeon, I believe there's a spiritual problem. But I also believe that there is a problem that comes from the spirit but is manifest in the physical. The Bible says that the God of mammon, money, has blinded their eyes. And we have some of that. I remember years ago, Reginald Austria asking people to be patient and they will get their share. And if you speak to some people, you will hear from them that some of them are still hopeful that they will get their peace one of those days. However, we all know that that's not sustainable. In fact, the house of cards is crumbling. We know that government cannot bring in, under their present circumstances, the monies that they have everywhere. And Dominica have money everywhere else, but we can't bring it in. They have given us all kinds of stories in terms of excuses for their inability to bring it in. But we all know that the financial systems of this world is strapping their belt down on this. Consequently, the FSU, for example, is looking for ways to satisfy the FATF and the CFATF, and they're looking for tightening that in all areas. One of the areas is to clamp down on non-profit organizations, quite frankly, who have minimum, or if you ask me, no effect on what's happening now, because these non-profit organizations, really and truly, they ain't getting money from no place. Okay, I mean, I'm sure there are some scoundrels in between some of them, but they are laden with the burden of going after non-profit organizations. Whereas those who are not able to bring money in, who used to be able to bring them in, who are doing all kinds of things with the monies overseas and bringing in other assets into the country, somehow they go scot-free. Those who are able to come in private jets and walk through the customs because they have diplomatic passports with US dollars and EC dollars in briefcases are able to do that. I have been stunned that the Minister of Finance he was at the time had so much money in his office. I just could not understand it. And I made an exercise one day, and I know that at least $24,000 came from his office that day, and it wasn't $24,000 in checks. It was $24,000 in cash money, l'argent chèque. And if I were to dish out that kind of money from my home, from my church office, somebody would have alerted the bank, and they would have come to me to ask me, what am I doing for that money at my home? And that is a signal of money laundering. So you have all these kind of things. What do we do about it? We have to begin to, like I said, go down to the grassroots. Tell the people, where is your dollar coming from? Where is your money coming from? How are you educating your children? And here is why you can't buy books to send your children to school in September. Here's why you can't buy uniforms for them. Okay? I am packing a box tomorrow, Mr. G, with exercise books. Right? And it's not for me. I don't have children going to school. Okay? Exercise books and pens and pencils. So we can help the many people who are coming to ask for help daily. If I let you listen to those voice notes, it will break your heart. Okay? Why? Because they, quite frankly, do not have the wherewithal to do it. We need to get out there, show them that we can do better. But for us to do better, we have to remove this bunch of people who are sitting down and parading as the executive branch of government, who are quite frankly taking the country down the gutters. We have to find a way to eject these guys from this office and get the country that we love on the right trajectory. I'm thankful for the opportunity, Mr. G, and I've said to you that my boss has been signaling to me a long time that I have overstayed my welcome, and we are supposed to be on vacation.
Well, this boss is there. You have to listen to them, you know.
That's what I'm trying to do now.
Let me tell you something. You have to do what they tell you.
Good.
No, so we're just winding down right now. So these were your closing remarks. I just want to see if Simeon wants a minute to make a final closing remark before I go to Dr. Andre to wind it down. Simeon, you're muted.
No.
Well, on this whole issue of what we're talking about, I think what has to be foremost on our minds has to be the overall safety and security of our nation state, that is Dominica. And there are too many threats to the safety and security of Dominicans and to the stability of Dominica across the board. Small country of 305 square miles, less than 70,000 people. I think we must be concerned that every institution that is supposed to guarantee stability in the country has been undermined and doesn't seem to be, and I wouldn't only say undermined, but infested with an ominous spirit of compromise, of corruption, and of decaying attitude that is going to lead us nowhere. And we also have to be very concerned as well about the overall safety and security of our people, not only in terms of crime and violence, but in terms of their livelihood. Okay? The safety and security in matters regarding health and education and being able to have food on their table, being able to have a roof over their head, being able to be guaranteed employment, being able to be given free and equal protection under the law. Okay? And ensuring that everybody has a fair chance at justice and an opportunity to develop and grow. So I think these are my thoughts as we close, and I think for us to be guaranteed any integral development, we have to focus on how can we ensure that our people are beginning to feel that level of confidence, okay, that level of assuredness, and to be comfortable in their own space that is their native land. Because too many Dominicans are not comfortable and safe in their own living space that they live for various reasons. They're not sure if they're going to have bread tomorrow. They're not sure if they have a job tomorrow. They're not sure if sometimes if they walk the streets and they're going to be safe. They're not sure if they're going to be free from political persecution. There is too much distrust of neighbors. There is too much distrust of people in the workplace. There is too much fear of victimization. And people are living under the ambit of tension that creates a spirit of suspicion and distrust. We have to be able to overcome that and reach the era whereby we can be people where we feel comfortable in our space, where we can be happy, where we can celebrate as a people, where we can regain that identity of being united and working towards the progress of Dominica. And that can only happen if we make a resolute decision to use our hands and our minds and come the next election to tell these decaying administration, speak loudly and tell them they have had their say. Let Dominicans now have a new day.
And thanks a lot for that, Simeon. Really and truly, thanks a lot for that. Dr. Andre, your final word?
Yeah, well, let me thank the powers that be that has given me some voice. Let me thank those who've given me a little courage to speak my mind. And let me thank a certain radio station which has given voice to the voiceless. As Christians, many of us brought up in the Catholic tradition. Many of us have attended Mass and with great voice and articulation. Some of us are actually in certain choirs, quite frankly. We sing, this is blessed assurance. This is my story. This is my song. At this epoch, this junction of our history, we have to give meaning to those lyrics. Reclaim your story. Reclaim your song. Reclaim your heritage. Remember and be animated by the thought that the chain is strong as its weakest link. The community is as strong as its most impoverished citizen. And it is only when we uplift or we give voice to the voiceless, we give a little comfort to those who are suffering the most, only then can we take pride and boast that we are a society that, quite frankly, is worthy of being called a developing nation, and so on. When we sit silent or we stand aside, while the very institutions of governance, why our moral foundation is being eroded by locusts and by plagues, and why instead of building up shelters, instead of buttressing the foundations of our democracy, we run and hide in the wilderness. We take refuge and we hope that some Messiah on a white horse will come and rescue us. But once we realize that our salvation lies within ourselves, that it is within our God-given gifts and intelligence that we can save the soul of Dominica, only then can we take our place in the community of righteous nations and so on. And so I will take my leave. Like Pastor Rodney, I have a boss who beckons, so to speak. And what beckons me is not BB, but as I said, it's a boss who speaks a language that soothes the soul, as in a fashion that B&B plus coconut water will never do. We have to put things in perspective, and we have to rescue ourselves, because if this is not worth rescuing, then what is? And so I echo Simeon's thoughts and Pastor Rodney's. As long as we have breath, there's hope. As long as we can dream of a better world, then we have the capacity of making that world come into a reality. And I stand convinced that we have the wherewithal to effect that transformation. As long as we say we cannot afford the luxury of sitting on the dock of the bay. Was it Otis Redding who sang that wonderful song? Watching the tide. We have to channel our energies into one creative effort to bring peace and harmony and goodwill into this wonderful land. So I thank the listeners, and I wish everyone good evening, but it's time for me to take my leave. Thank you very much.
And thanks a lot, Pastor Ronnie. I too want to thank the listeners and the viewers who are still with us on Facebook and on YouTube, all the platforms, and listening in Radio Land. I want to thank you all. And I have to say that I absolutely agree with you, Dr. Andre, and with Simeon and with Pastor Rodney, because I think it is time for this government to go. You're talking about 24 years. I mean, come on, common sense should tell us that we're not smarter than St. Lucia and Antigua and St. Kitts and all the other islands, and they change their government from time to time. What's wrong with us? We cannot see the decay. We cannot see the decline. So I just want to share that same thought, because we know that when a government remains in power too long, power corrupts. And we all know that absolute power corrupts, absolutely. I'm not sure there is a point of any return for this regime, because they've just been in power too long. If you keep doing the same thing the same way every time, you get so used to it, that's all you know what to do, especially if you're benefiting from it. So I just want to say thank you, Lambi, and thank you, Sherwin. Thank you, all our listeners. Thank you, Pastor Rodney, and Dr. Andre and Simeon, and everyone who's been listening to us tonight. Thank you so much for tuning in. I hope we did something that we all could learn something from. So good night, everybody.
Good night. Good night.
Pastor Rodney, enjoy the rest of your vacation.
A very good night to you. Thank you very much.
And so my boss just told me it's time for me to. So they gave me the sign. So I'm going to.
All right, good.
Take care, everybody. Good night.
Oh,